Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Mary Paronyan. Many high school students dream of being the first in their families to earn a degree from a college or a university, like here at Cal State Northridge. But according to the Post-Secondary National Policy Institute, first-generation students are less likely to complete their college degree in 6 years than their peers whose parents went to college.
As a first gen, definitely I was alone. Like I was lonely, because okay, college accepted. Okay, the journey is open, you know what I mean? But now I have to think about how I'm gonna start going from point A to point B, which is the graduation, and then in between point A and point B, they have a lot of different struggles and obstacles that are waiting for me, and which is undiscovered adventures are ahead of waiting for me, right? And then one of the thing was networking, how you mentioned, right? Because first of all, I don't have any other friends or family member who graduated or who had some education in Cali.
Today, we're going to examine the stresses many first-generation students deal with, financially and socially. On Point's Diane Zermeño has more.
Thank you, Mary. Here with me today, I have a panel of first-generation students here to share their testimonies with us. First up, I have Professor Melanie Shaw, who is part of the CSUN Africana Studies Department. I have Cinthya Zavala, who is a Fresno State student as well, and Bryan Abarca, who is a student at Los Angeles City College. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming in today. And I would like to start by asking Bryan, when did you make the decision to pursue higher education?
Honestly, it was very last moment. I think it's funny because I feel like a lot of people come from a background where college was advertised to them. I think if it wasn't in school, I don't think I was ever really advertised the idea of going to college or pursuing higher education. I think it was something very spontaneous that didn't really occur to me until my senior year of high school, where I started applying to colleges. And I thought, well, I mean, it doesn't hurt, right? So I applied to places in California, but also on the East Coast. And I originally got waitlisted at NYU, and then I got in, and that was my introduction to adulthood and all those mechanisms of college. And I felt like it was a good start, but it was also a lot of work. And I think you give and you take, with things like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Melanie, what expectations did your family have for your future when you were growing up?
The expectations that my family had on me was that I was going to go to college. I feel like it resonates with a lot of first generation students that I have year in and year out, where our family, they raise us, letting us know that there's elementary school, there's middle school, there's high school, and there's college. College, going to a four-year university, that's not an option. It's a part of the whole educational system being raised in my household. So the expectations, even when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, it was instilled in me that I would be going to college because, my family never had the privilege of being raised in this country, being able to be accepted into a 4-year college. So the expectations for me was that I was going to college. And, I did.
Thank you so much for sharing. Cinthya, was there anything that made your path to college unique when you were growing up?
I moved to this country when I was around 6. I'm from El Salvador. And my parents, like Melanie said, it's always been instilled in my family that college is just another pathway of school. It's just another step. It's not really an option of, hey, you can do this or that. You have to go to college. And I think part of the difficulty was just like when you come into a country and you don't speak the language and you don't have any family support, it's just growing, because here I feel like sometimes there was always friends who are like, oh, I'm not going to college. I'm not doing this. I'm going to go, study abroad, or I'm going to take a year absence and go travel. And I think for me, it was part of just understanding that, growing into the fact that even though college was an expectation, I had to accept that I actually wanted to do it. It wasn't just forced on me by like my family's expectations.
So this is a question that I have for all of you. Did you feel prepared to go to college? And Melanie, I'm going to start with you.
No, I didn't feel prepared. Even though it was something that was instilled into just like my upbringing, I can say when it came to even filling out applications, I was ill prepared. My mother and my father are not US citizens. Well, they are now, but at that point, I believe my mom didn't get her green card until I walked across the stage for high school. So it was difficult for me to even learn how to just fill out applications on my own. Even on the first day of stepping foot at on CSUN, because I am a CSUN alumni, and now I teach there. The first day I stepped foot on CSUN's campus, it wasn't orientation because once again I'm extremely shy and extremely, guarded. It was the first day of my very first class, and my mom took me because I was raised, in South Central. So she drove me all the way from where I was raised on 51st and Avalon, all the way to, Cal State Northridge. It's definitely a completely different world than my household and my neighborhood and who I was very used to in my environment. In my environment, I was used to being around, neighbors who weren't going to a four-year university. So I would say just based off of my support system, even though my family is very supportive, I'm just based off my support system, my environment, my neighborhood, even the high school I went to, I feel like I was extremely ill prepared when stepping foot into this realm of a four-year university.
Thank you, Melanie. And Bryan, I saw you nodding your head with some sentiments that Melanie said. Did you feel prepared to go to college?
No, not at all. I threw myself into a situation that I knew was going to be taxing, but I felt like I bought into this idea that, well, this is what it's like for everybody. You grow up in a family that, wants you to succeed, but don't necessarily, offer that helping hand, whether it's financially or emotionally. And I think you just kind of have to, grow thick skin, and you have to say to yourself, well, we're going to take it day by day, but we're going to get there.
Cinthya, I know that in our pre-interview, you had discussed that you had been part of programs, but did you feel prepared to go to college even with those?
Definitely not, especially because a lot of the things that I joined and the workshops I took, they were much later. It took me seeing other people, go through them. But the first few years of high school were really hard, not having those resources. And then even once you have them, they help a lot, but there's still always this expectation that as you're growing, you should know what you want to do. And there's always, like, oh, just ask your parents. Like I remember when I had to fill in my DREAM Act application for my financial aid, I had some questions and they were like, oh, well, we don't have experience with that at like, maybe your parents can help you. It's like FAFSA. And I was like, my parents have no clue what FAFSA is. Like, there's not going to be, a lot of help there. And I also don't want to put that pressure on them because I know sometimes they struggle because they're like, we wish we could do more in terms of helping you with these steps that I feel like for my peers have been, just natural steps that they take in their journey in school. But for me, it was just one of those things where it's like I had to journey through it and figure it out all on my own.
You had the unique experience of being a DACA student during the Trump administration. I believe when you began college, it was in 2017, and that was when President Trump had announced that he wanted to end the program. What was that like the last 4 years throughout your college career?
It's definitely a difficult experience. I remember I was very excited to start school because I really enjoy going to school. But there was a lot of times when it was really frustrating because I used to tell my mom, I'm like, what's the point of me going through all this process? And I'm like, what if, this just all goes away and like all these years of schooling, they're going to be for nothing because I won't be able to work or I might not be able to continue my educational goal. So it was definitely one of those things where I felt like, almost like a puppet, you know, like sometimes they pull your strings and they want you to be happy and tell you, you know, you'll do this and you'll be okay. And then sometimes they'll be like, well, no, the program that's keeping your life together is going to end. And then you're kind of stuck with no choices. So it was definitely a very anxious time and a very difficult time.
I want to know if when you were in your undergrad, did you have a safety net too? If at some point in college you couldn't afford some books or housing or anything else?
My safety net was loans. And even with loans, I feel like it was so hush hush. And I didn't even know how to, like, what was my first step with taking out a loan. All of that I learned on my own. I would say that was my only safety net. And then also as an undergrad, I had two jobs. Both were on campus, so I was also providing mostly for myself. But without these loans, I don't think that I could have gotten too far. So my safety net was money that wasn't even mine.
So we spoke with another first generation student about their mental health struggles, and we want to show you that clip.
I was having a lot of mental breakdown because at some point I was very like so angry because like I seen a lot of my friends, the people that I know of, been succeeding, the things that have been doing it, you know, and they're always sharing their, you know, all these accomplishments on their media. But I'm like, where am I? Like, am I going the right path? Am I on the right journey? Like, because I never, like, my family never really asked me how I'm doing. I mean, they do. They're like, oh, did you eat? I'm like, yeah, I'd eat. I was like, okay, did you have a good sleep? I was like, yeah, good sleep. And then when I'm about to like open it up, like my struggles, like the life that I've been going through as a college student, they're always like, oh, I'm busy. I'll talk to you later. Period. Bye. And then I never really had a chance to open that part with them a lot, you know, because I know they're having a hard time too. I know they have a lot of responsibility to take care of it. And then I don't want to be a part of that person, just lean on, you know, or just become like quote quote annoying person, you know, in my own mentality. So I've been like bottling it up all the time. And then some point I'll just be angry. I was like, I wish I was born from a wealthy family. I wish I was not in here. You know, I wish I just could just done here. I wish I could just give up. You know, I wish I just could stop everything. You know, so I was having a really, really, really depressing moment, and then I was so mad at why I'm a first gen. You know, even though like my uncle and my aunt graduated from from college, and they're succeeding in their life, but why they're not helping me? You know, like all these like stuff, that negative ideas that just like kept getting in my head, you know, and it was really hard time for it. But definitely now I know how to like handle like my stress in different ways.
All right, so in that clip, he discusses feelings of anger, not really having a place to go. I want to know, what is your reactions, and do you feel something similar to some things that he discussed? And Cinthya, I'll start with you.
I can definitely like understand where he's coming from. I think for me, it was a lot of different feelings. It was a lot of, you know, anger in myself. It was a lot of, you know, just feeling like I can't, you know, talk to my parents because they already have so much stuff that they're going through and they already struggle in their own way. And then also it's like my friends, you know, we're all struggling in different ways. Like my best friend, you know, she's providing for herself and going through college and working. So I know she has her own struggles. And it's like, I didn't want to put any of my worries or any of my fears onto other people. But at the same time, it was not working out for me to just like keep it all in and, you know, push my feelings down because they weren't going away. And I kind of just had to talk through it. And I used a lot of like mental health services at the community college that I went through before I transferred to Fresno State. And that helped a lot because I didn't want to feel like a burden to the people that I loved. I didn't want to feel like I was adding to their own stresses and their own hardships in their life. But I also realized that I couldn't do it on my own and I couldn't take all these feelings that I had and just ignore them.
Thank you, Cinthya. Melanie?
There was one thing he mentioned that hit me really hard because even as an adult in my 30s, I am still, this thought continues to come up. Why is my life so much harder than, my friends? Why is my life so much harder than other people that are my age, that look exactly like me in this body and this skin complexion, that are, more Americanized than I am? And it just seems like I'm constantly asking the question, like, why was I not born into a wealthy family? And sometimes it's not just like, well, why wasn't I born into a wealthy family? Sometimes it's like, well, why wasn't I born into an American family? And I think that's that last question alone that I continue to internalize continues to add to I call it my first generation trauma, because that's exactly what it is. It's first generation trauma. The things that you are constantly told when you're growing up, things to hide, things to suppress, that continue to make me feel, I can't speak for every other first generation student or first generation individual, but with my first generation trauma, there's this need to constantly work harder than any other individual that's in my close surrounding or in my environment. This need to overexhaust myself, this need to constantly be in survival mode, all has to do with mental health. This feeling of, it doesn't matter how many degrees I have, because I have more than one degree. It's just like, I never feel good enough. I never feel good enough. And I constantly feel like all of my friends are 5 steps ahead of me. And I'm trying my hardest as a first generation individual to try to keep up.
Thank you, Melanie. And Bryan, I saw you nodding your head with some of the sentiments that were said and from the clip. I'd like to know your thoughts.
I honestly feel like it doesn't matter what your story is or where you come from or where your parents come from. Being first generation, you always ask yourself 2 questions. Why wasn't I born white? And how do I become white? And it goes back to that question I believe you asked Cinthya about Trump and this whole political idea of, and I think it leeches off of so many I don't know, cultural, I don't know, differences. And I hate it so much because I feel like regardless of what POC group you come from, I feel like it's always like 5 steps up and then 2 steps back. I feel like you have to work twice as hard for half the results.
So I'm seeing a lot of sentiments of kind of like feeling alone or even feeling behind with all of you. And Cinthya, I'd like to bring up that undocumented students only make up 2% of the population in higher education. What does that statistic mean to you? Does it bring any emotions of any sort?
I think it kind of makes me especially I think I was talking to my family recently that just as sometimes it's very hard to think about the difficulties that it comes with being undocumented and being in higher education. Just the fact that I live in California, and it is a state that allows you a few more opportunities as an undocumented student. I feel like sometimes, it makes me really sad for other people who have this need or want to be in higher education, but are in places where it's even less achievable or even less of an option than it was for me. But it's still really, I think it's hard because I feel like I like to assume that there is more people that would want to be in higher education, but they're probably still stuck in that mind place that I was when I was in high school, that I was like, what's the point of me going to college if I might not ever get the opportunity to, work in the field that I'm going to spend this amount of time dedicated on, why would I go to school and study to be a teacher if I'm never going to teach, because I'm never going to have the documents that will allow me to work in this country. So I think sometimes it's just really sad to see that people aren't able to achieve something that they might want to do just because a legal status doesn't warrant you the same, rights to an education and to further your abilities in life.
I wanted to close this up talking about networking and your next steps looking forward after you graduate, or any next steps like Melanie's case about your career. I like to say that some non-first generation students have an access to a network, whether it be from their parents or their grandparents who went to college, and that's how they get into their careers. I'd like to know, how has networking been for you starting from scratch, and how will that you apply that into your future steps in your career? I will start with Melanie for this one.
I would say, first, I want to say that networking is also a privilege. I feel that students that I went to school with, even people that I'm still in close communication with now that are doing extremely well, is because of that foundation that their parents had. And I can honestly say that just seeing what industry their parents were in and how that shaped the opportunities that, you know, kind of solidified the foundation that they're living off of now. It was because their parents already established a networking system for them to, you know, just fall into. So even now in my department, I feel that I am playing catch up with everyone that's in my department, even though it's, you know, Department of Africana Studies. I'm in a department with other, you know, amazing educated individuals that are of color. Even being in a department that is predominantly of color, I still feel, because my family is not American, that there are more steps that I have to take in order to have a stronger network system.
Cinthya, I'll go with you next.
I like to say that I had the privilege that my boyfriend's mother, she worked at a preschool, and that is how I got interested in working with children. She told me about them having an opening for a camp counselor for summer school. And that's how I got started into what I'm studying now, which is child development. And I always, you know, said that even though my networking now that I'm at, you know, at a university has been my own work, if it wasn't for that help that I got and that privilege that I had of having contact with someone that was able to give me, you know, a leg into that position, I probably wouldn't be in here. And I mean, that's not to discount the fact that, you know, I still had to interview, and she didn't work where I got the job. She just worked at the community center that hosted it. So, but that even though the work of, you know, being interviewed and getting the job and then continuing to work there for years after was me, I still think that, you know, I was very thankful that I had that, you know, privilege of being able to even find out about that job to begin with. But at the same time, I always try to, you know, be thankful that I feel like a lot of the networking that I've done now, and, you know, every mentor that I have now, like I'm working with a professor at my university and working on research with her. Those are networkings that I had to do on my own, and that I didn't, you know, what's it called? I didn't have to, you know, anyone to lean on and say, hey, do you know anything about this? Like, that was all me. And even though sometimes, like Melanie mentions, it's very taxing and it's very hard to know that there is people that, you know, they have that fallback, or they have already that foot in to the door to to whatever they're studying or whatever they're working for. I always like to, you know, feel proud to say, you know what, even though I am playing catch up and I have a lot where to go, where I've gotten has already been so much farther than I thought I would have, you know, when I first started this. And I think that's really important.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Bryan, I will finish this up with you.
I think networking is so detrimental, but it's also so influential, and it's a very powerful tool to have. But I think in its essence, I think it really comes down to ambition. And I think you either have that or you don't, regardless of where you come from. I think, you know, I remember once I was having lunch with a friend, and a friend that he had came over to the table that we were eating at, and he said, oh, like, you're studying I think I want to say it was like economics at this like really prestigious university. I can't remember. And he said, yeah. And he was like, oh, it's going to be so easy to get a job. He's like, I already have one. I just have to graduate. Like my dad is best friends with like the CEO of someone or somewhere. And like, you know, I'm chilling. I don't have to worry about that. And I remember thinking, that is such a luxury that he probably will never think twice about. You know, I think people like us dream and we covet this idea of like, I don't know, we are going to reach that success. You know, like there's going to be some sort of, you know, a cultivation of our work ethic and our efforts and like dumb luck. And somehow we're going to reach the dream, like the career of our dreams, you know, and unfortunately, it's going to be a much more arduous task for some just because you will be born with disadvantages.
Thank you so much to all of you for coming here today and sharing all of your testimonies with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Do you know what to do?
Yes.
Bring it back to me. Then I'll give you your money.
Frank Thomas, you are under arrest for the theft of trade secrets. Come with me.
Bye-bye, Frank. Theft of trade secrets is illegal.
You're on your boat. Your engines are dead. You're starting to sink, and you can't get a cell phone signal. Thankfully, you have a Marine VHF radio on board tuned to Channel 16. The Coast Guard and other boaters monitor distress calls on Channel 16. A radio is the best way to call for help. Don't assume a cell phone will work. Communication is your lifeline. Be sure you're heard.
I came to CSUN to learn. I came to CSUN to grow. I came to CSUN to prepare. I learned to ask, to analyze, to communicate. I grew as a writer, a thinker, a citizen. I left CSUN prepared to participate, prepared to contribute, prepared to lead.
Aloha, I'm Linda Lingle, and I'm a matador.
Pool party at Jesse's. Can you drive? I'm toasted.
Nope, I'm high. But I can order us a ride.
Okay.
Friendly reminder, don't drive high. If you feel different, you drive different.
Thank you for watching On Point. You can follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can hear us on KCSN's 88.5 FM on Sunday mornings. You can even watch us on LA36 and Santa Clarita Valley Television. From Diane Zermeño and producers Emily Brubaker, Catherine Hernandez, and Dalen Simmons, I'm Mary Paronyan.